dual albums are somewhat a staple of the music industry to me. 6am used the format and time between releases to amplify the story being told in the Prayers duology. Five Finger Death Punch made Wrong and Righteous a duology focusing on two halves of a whole. Pink Floyd used the format to tell a very long story in their legendary album, The Wall. Stone Sour did something with House of Golden Bones. I'm not smart enough to figure that out exactly. And if I were to spend the rest of this video talking about various bands and their dual albums, we would all be here for a very long time, and we're gonna be here for a very long time anyway, so how about we look at something a little different? You read the title, you've seen the runtime. Trivium's unofficial dual album that I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who thinks is a dual album. Hello, unfortunately I'm back from Kurozomu, which is a very dated reference now. I started writing the script in October when the first episode of Uzumaki released. This one's a little late. Anyway, I'm here to talk about whatever I feel like talking about. And while I won't be talking about the wild Uzumaki anime, I am here to talk about Trivium. While What the Dead Man Say and In the Court of the Dragon is hardly meant to be looked at as a double album, especially given the release dates, April 2020 and October 2021, respectively, I noticed a similarity, a sort of narrative through line between the two that I couldn't ignore and have latched onto as a form of helping me understand these two wildly different albums. I don't think this is a correct way to look at them by any means, though I still do anyway. One being a story of grief and the other a descent into revenge. One of the biggest things for me while listening to any music is artist intent, trying to understand the music in the purest form the artist originally intended. Hell, I don't even mess with the mixing to help achieve that. I personally frown upon bass boosting or slowing a song down, speeding it up, or any such action, as I feel it removes too much of the artist's original intent. And while more recently I can understand where people are coming from, preferring songs that way, mostly coming from a standpoint of once it leaves the artist's hands, it then becomes in equal parts the viewers as well. It's the reason I'm so fascinated to hear what you guys want to say about the songs I talk about, and what they say to you. Everyone's perception is a little different, and I've just spent the last 100 words or so justifying why I refuse to change my stance on Dead Men and Dragons being a dual album. If art will inherently change meaning once it leaves the hands of the artist, and we shape that art based on our own perceptions, then why should I not be able to understand a piece of art as something outside of what the artist initially intended? After all, while not by my hands the art exists, my perception will inherently change the meaning of that art to some regard, and oftentimes into something almost completely different to what the artist was originally intending for it to be taken as. Now that I've properly justified my stance, how about a bit on the band itself? The metalcore band formed in 1999 in Florida, making them about as old as I am, and I have emotions about that. The band's current lineup and the lineup for both of these albums are frontman Matt Hafey on guitars and vocals. I'm pretty sure he's lead guitar, technically speaking, but he does rhythm in the breakdowns, so I'm a little unsure the exact terminology. Pori, with a last name I can't pronounce, here's a TTS for it.
Bolio.
Pori is also on guitar, mostly rhythm if I'm not mistaken, but does backing vocals for some of the harsh vocals that vocal. Excellent writing, Rivers, as always. Paolo, with another last name that I'll let TTS handle,
Gregoletto,
is the band's bassist, and backing vocals for the clean vocal, and Alex Bent on drums. He's definitely my favorite drummer the band's had. He's also like the fifth drummer for the band. As for me, I got into them around 2016, and they're one of the bands that introduced me to harsh vocals and specifically harsher sounds. They helped me come to understand why they're good, actually. The band will always have a special place in my heart, and as they're a band that was introduced to me by a former best friend, someone who is sadly no longer with us, he passed away between these two albums. Important information, as is something that shaped my thoughts and feelings on these two albums. If not something you've gathered, this dissection will likely have a lot in the way of emotions. If it's not something you're mentally ready for, come back later. If you're still here, then let's do this. What the Dead Men Say. Released on April 24, 2020, What the Dead Men Say, or Deadman as I will continue to shorten it for breathing purposes, taking a more narrative look, so things may be a little less in-depth than what you might expect, as I'll primarily be looking at the lyrics. The album cover, to me, is a heart emitting smoke, as if embers from a fire. The heart is decaying and smoldering, as though it doesn't seem to have any embers present. The album starts off with this actually quite beautiful instrumental track, 9, written in Roman numerals, leading directly into the title track. The music video actually combines these two tracks and makes the transition more seamless. In the music video, we get introduced to the two main characters for this album. The guy, who we'll call the Mourner, and this lady who has the dopest hair dress this side of Lil Nas X. She will be what we call the Catastrophist. And yes, the music video for the Catastrophist does show an entirely different person. I have face blindness and didn't realize that at first. I'm not even kidding. Additionally, the person in the music video for Catastrophist is implied to be the Catastrophist. I am saying that so much. I originally thought it was the same person, and thus my narrative was made with that in mind. So if you just accept that, we can move on. Otherwise, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. The implication is that she is, in some regards, controlling him or guiding him to do these things under false pretenses. The main body movement being made throughout the video probably has more significance than I can understand, but to describe it, it's a line drawn from shoulder to shoulder, hands blocking the peripherals, then moving to the crown, coming down before pushing past the guts. To preface, I'm not Christian or Catholic. This will be my interpretation based off my own understanding and what research I was able to find. The first part, the line across the shoulders, reminds me of the 4 points of contact a Catholic might in blessing themselves, or crossing themselves in more biblical terms. However, the fingers are usually lifted from one's body. The final line is drawn, the Holy Spirit part. By not doing so, my interpretation is that you're not allowing the Spirit to exist within you. Next, blocking off the peripherals forces one to ignore all else, look forward and not around. Then the crown, an ascendancy to something more, something greater. The gesture is performed just above the head from the look of it, and while it might be a bit of a stretch, the tips of the fingertips touching seem to be about where one would draw the crown chakra. Though I may be missing some significance, to me the crown chakra is a connection to all types of things. Specifically, a connection to spiritualism and a higher understanding. By having the fingertips touch on the spot, it's implying they want to grasp, but it's barely out of reach. And as the hands push down in front of the body, it comes across as this attempt to make it more attainable. In short, the hand movement the mourner is doing throughout, movements taught to them by the catastrophists, are seemingly trying to commune with spirits. The song itself repeats the chorus, "What the dead men say, it's just between us. What the dead men say, you can't let go." It seems to me that the mourner had something said to him before the person he's mourning passed. Something that was very important, that he can neither tell nor let go of. In my reading of the song, the catastrophist seems to want that information. It's maybe a slight stretch, but I think it works. We also know that who he is now is not something he can recognize. "I'm calling out to you, can you hear me? Numb and disconnected, just beyond your sight. I'm not myself anymore, but I'm not alone." The song opens with this verse. Before we get this cry out that they aren't alone, we see the catastrophist guiding the mourner constantly throughout. Thus, the cries that he's not alone came across both as a panic and a warning of sorts. And the bridge, the lyrics say, "Is this the light or a distant mirror? You kept me for yourself, that much is clear." Therein being this implication that the mourner isn't sure if he's actually going to be able to see the person he's mourning, the person he's doing this for. And he's not come to understand that the catastrophist only wants what she's after, not giving much of a damn about what else happens. The instruments then come in for the breakdown. With this scream from Matt, it feels like it's almost painful revelation. Then the mourner seems to go off script. This map type thing has been getting messed with in the background, and I can't make heads or tails of it, but the mourner moves the pieces he's been moving back to the start, only to not let go and move it more. Stopping on a different point, the music stops for this point, drawing attention to it. The next time we see the catastrophist after this, she's blurry. And while she had been at points prior, this being the first shot afterwards seems like she's preparing to lose control in some regards. Though the more clear shots in the rest of the video seem to imply that's not too much of a case. We see the mourner looking up into the faint light for a shot, then looking down, before turning around and walking away, interspersed with shots as if he was thinking about everything before making his decision. The decision that we won't see the effects of until next album. Then we see the obelisk from the beginning. An obelisk that I didn't mention because I don't understand the significance of it at all. In the next song, the band is gathered on the couch for a music video, seeming to want this lady's downfall. The lady, as mentioned before, implied to be the catastrophist. However, as the video implies, there is more than one. And additionally, I still think that the lady with the cool headdress is meant to be the catastrophist. I may be flawed in my logic, but the narrative of the music video itself seems to be largely unrelated to the rest of the story. I just mentioned it to point out the biggest problem with how I look at this. And yes, I actually did get these two confused. Like I said, they look nothing alike, and I didn't realize it largely because I didn't watch the music video, really. Just not how I consume music-based media. Anyways, the song itself. Your catastrophe. The one who's come to devastate catastrophists. You stole our innocence. It's the chorus, and when it's said, we come to a much better understanding of who this catastrophist is. This person who's only meant to be bringing destruction and steals the innocence of people. And while it's pretty self-evident based on what we've already covered, I want to put more emphasis on the last line by posing a question. What exactly was the innocence stolen? We have, at this point, seen the catastrophist be this person who will manipulate the vulnerable in order to achieve what they want. And such, the idea that we can no longer talk with the dead. The innocence stolen, then, was the sanctity of death. While it's hard to argue that there is true innocence in something as macabre as death, there is, to me at least, an innocence in the finality of it. Once a person is gone, all we can really do is grieve and move on as best we can. With the catastrophist coming in and saying that one can talk to the dead again, if only they work under her guidance. And then there's the pre-chorus. I feel like we're falling, a lifeline just out of our reach. I feel our collapsing, the arrogant up to our knees. In this, the mourner seems to think all is lost. The catastrophist has done her damage. People are now convinced the end is not, in fact, the end. And in such, the arrogance of the people is starting to become like wading in water. Also, unrelated, but I misheard these lyrics. The actual line is the arrogant numb to our needs, according to official lyrics. But I still, to this day, do not hear that. Unlike most instances of misheard lyrics, once I know what it actually says, I can usually hear what it actually says. Plus, it makes more sense with how I understand the song. Not the point. Track 3. Amongst the Shadows and the Stone. Tangent time! I remember when this album came out and seeing a lot of people online talking about how this was the best song. And like, it's good, right? But Bending the Arc to Fear is better, for the heavier tracks at least. I will not take criticism on this point, but feel free to comment that I'm wrong and why. It's good for the algorithm, or so I've been told. So the song starts off with the lines, bloody corpses, broken bones revealed. A throng of clashes crushed our nightmares sealed. Amongst the shadows and the stone. For me, this is almost certainly the context for the innocence that was stolen in accordance with the last song, as well as evidence that the catastrophist is very much not someone to be trusted. Obviously, the first line talks about the dead, however, the second and last line may require a bit more explanation. A throng is a densely packed group of beings which may or may not be people. However, the throng in question is of clashes. In other words, this isn't just people gathered, it's an uprising, an all-out melee, an uprising that's being crushed. Note the use of past tense. And the final line seeming to me to be about a graveyard. Graveyards are often depicted as shadowy places, and there's stones everywhere in them. Not only the gravestones themselves, but also a lot of times over the plots themselves. While it's very possible that it's solely about a defeated uprising, there's more context that insinuates it's not quite that simple. Additionally, I believe the 3 lines in the chorus are noting different points. If they're in a graveyard, I doubt there would be any showing of broken bones, much less a throng of clashes. Even if it's the place the catastrophist has come to call home, the level of disrespecting the dead in holding a protest in a graveyard is too much for me to buy. As mentioned, there is also more context. The harder we fight, the faster we fall. Stabbed in the back, defeated we crawl. The joke in the end that no one will know. We're dying for nothing at all. While the catastrophist seems to have won at this point, if we can take this song as a general public's understanding and revelation, then we can see a public sway at the very minimum. And given the context in the chorus that I mentioned before, I hardly think it's much of a stretch. The masses have come to understand that fighting the catastrophist is somewhat pointless as she's already won, and doing so only brings their downfall faster. They were betrayed by someone they respected, and now have no choice but to crawl away, presumably like pieces of some game they have no control over. And those fighting and losing their lives are losing it for nothing. With that, we move on to my personal favorite track on this album, Bleed Into Me. Both in context of the narrative and just flat out musically, this is my favorite track. For context, I fully believe this is from the perspective of our villain. Bleed into me, an ounce of your empathy. Eyes locked you can see, a ghost town, invisible city. Bleed. It's how the song opens, and hopefully you can see how this is most likely from the catastrophist's point of view, but let me break it down for you in reverse. Given the fact there is now a ghost town, and the listener is meant to have their eyes locked on it, the singer is asking for the listener to bleed an ounce of empathy into them. If we assume the listener is meant to be the mourner, then we can grasp with pretty good effect what's being asked here. The catastrophist doesn't feel a shred of empathy for the town she's decimated and is now asking the mourner for any amount he can give, even if it means bleeding to make it happen. An extreme measure to be sure, but that's not all she's asking. As it bleeds into me, let it sink in for you. Tell them the story, tell them the truth. Let it bleed into you. The catastrophist knows that she isn't the only culpable one here. The mourner likely brought her to the town after all, so he could have a chance to talk with the mourned. And she's pushing him to speak on that in the chorus. Additionally, there's implication that the mourner knew this would happen. In the first proper verse after the opening lines, bleed into me, those feelings you're harboring. The silence says it all. Tragedy, the look before the fall. Again, working backwards, the mourner knew and is now in a state of presumably shocked silence. My man's surprised that the warning labels were there for a reason, and is likely harboring regret and sympathy and all those other emotions that the catastrophist is still asking for and wanting to understand, whether as a ploy and manipulation or genuine want to connect. It's unclear, but my bid's on the former. To add to all of it, we have the pre-chorus verse. Struggles and dreams mix into one. The grim rituals have only begun. No use in leaving, now drift off before you are gone. Before you are gone. This reiteration of before the mourner is gone, to me, pushing that while he cannot leave, as his sins would likely carry with him, he is still able to drift away. But what exactly is the difference? By drifting away, he's still leaving. To me, it's double speak. By saying he cannot leave but cannot drift away, the catastrophist is downplaying the leaving and running away, while also saying he's unable to do so. After all, it's not like he has a whole lot of choice in the matter. The plans she's had are set into motion, but remember the opening line and the chorus? The mourner is now capable of talking with the dead, and it's what he wanted, but the price is way higher than what he wanted to. The struggles and dreams have mixed into one, and he's not running away. I stand in defiance of your ways. The defiant. Nothing can absolve you. of this hate, the defiant in your way. It's the chorus to this battle cry anthem on the album. Track 6, The Defiant. As you probably pieced together, but I'm gonna say anyway, this is back on track with being the perspective of the mourner. In this case, seeming to actively stand against her like he should have from the start. And he fucking lays into her, but also acknowledges where he went wrong. Complicit in ruin, protect with lies, defenestrate, destroy, mock, and victimize. He was the one complicit to the ruin he seems to be aware that she would have brought, and though he acknowledges that he's not letting her off anymore, she's been protecting herself with lies, apparently throwing people out of windows, and in the last song seeming to mock those that she destroyed. And yes, I do think in some regards she is victimizing herself and bleed into me. What with asking for empathy and all? And even the pre-chorus seems to play into this overwhelming defiance in its own regard. Nothing to gain, playing their games. It's always the same. Corruption betrays. He finally understands why everything ended up this way and his place in it. He played her game and realized there wasn't really anything to gain from such. Acknowledging the corruption he sought out would only lead to betrayal. A betrayal that we saw way back in track 4, Amongst the Shadows and the Song. In the next song, we see the conviction the mourner seemed to want, all while dealing with this newfound trauma. Sickness unto you, first verse is, I felt your heart stop beating with my own 2 hands. I felt my life lose meaning. I'll never be whole again. I held you in my arms as she injected you with death. We made you feel like there was nothing wrong. In this, there's an implication that the catastrophist was there when the mourner lost their loved one. And though he now understands that the catastrophist was only going to bring ruin, he didn't at the time and allowed her to do her work, putting his own trust in her that she would save his loved one's life. Like an anger brewing from a deal that wasn't met on her side, something we already know didn't happen. That blind trust is what caused all of this to happen. The mourner blindly trusted the catastrophist to save his loved one, and then blindly trusted her to at least give him the chance to say what he was wanting to. In the pre-chorus, we get to understand the toll this has taken on the mourner. It won't stop replaying in my head are the first 2 lines, and as someone who has post-traumatic issues, this sounds like post-traumatic issues to me. It's very likely that in the events of the song Deadman, the mourner was still in shock, but with the recent events, everything's finally coming to head and is forcing him to understand what he's been going through. It's already been implied throughout this album that the mourner seems to not really be thinking rationally or at all, really, seeming to be in a state of shock or denial even. And the bridge of this song is almost a confirmation of that. A part of me is fucking dead. My lungs are filled up with regret. For every day I was away, I'll never be whole again. It's even said 3 times in total. Once in whispers, like it's a new understanding being formed. Then more screaming out the pain. Then one final time after the breakdown, more defiant in tone. The mourner is regretful that the final hours with his loved one wasn't by their side, but finding a way to fight the inevitable. Additionally, you may have noticed the stages of grief being out of order here. This could be deliberate action from the catastrophist. By forcing grief to be processed completely out of order, she is causing an inability to fully process that grief, though it may be a significant stretch. But this all comes with a question mark in the background. Who is the sickness being given unto? My personal belief is that it's the catastrophist. She wanted the mourner to bleed into her any empathy and emotions he was feeling, and now he's doing just that, giving her the trauma and regret he's finally begun to process that he has. In the next song, we see the mourner finally come to terms with everything to some extent. The song is called Scattering the Ashes, and while that in itself is explanatory enough, I'm going to talk about it anyway because if I don't, I'll lose my flow completely and the script will be unable to recover. A father and son, two lives now come undone. A father and son, too late now all is gone. It's the entire pre-chorus, in which we get the pretty solid introduction to who the mourner is mourning, his father. And while Sickness Unto You does mention that their lost person is their beloved, I personally don't feel that it can't be a familial beloved. You would still call your family your loved ones in most circumstances after all. We also get a pretty direct statement about how this has affected the mourner. His life, like the life of his father, has come undone, though under a very different light. In the chorus itself, the mourner vows he's going to scatter the ashes of his father. In the bridge, it said, "What's lost, we'll never know." And I think there's something beautiful about that in a way. Grief processes differently for everyone, and one of the biggest things I've personally dealt with in those times is wondering if those I've lost would be proud of who I am now. When I play my bass, screaming my lungs out like the person I inherited the bass from would hear me if I just scream loud enough. Is he proud of me for making it so? I've lost the chance to find out. This album is very much about grief and loss, and it's possibly been the biggest driving force in my own, both to process it and move on as best I can, but that isn't exclusive. The Catastrophist is a force that forces the mourner to confront his grief and his hand in it. While one could easily look at this album and just see the stages of grief, there's a lot more going on here for me if you haven't gathered. The next song is probably one of the better examples of that. Bending the Arc to Fear starts off with the following lines. A strain of vigilance, deep roots that all connect. We wait so diligent, watching you, watching you. While the mourner is finally processing his grief, scattering the ashes of his father, and coming to terms with his loss, he's being watched by what is unclear, but they are waiting for him. These eyes you show, bending the arc to fear. There's only one more song that puts this much emphasis in the eyes, in my opinion. While eyes are brought up periodically throughout this album, they're never the focus in their lines. Bleed Into Me, the focus is drawn from the eyes to the ghost town. Sickness Unto You mentions it, but it seems more about the trauma than anything to me, with the eyes being mentioned as a supplementation to that idea. What exactly are the lines about? With the overarching theme of being watched at all points, there's this sort of paranoia that sets in. And paranoia is usually pretty well associated with fear, so the mourner, while trying to finally mourn, is being watched by the catastrophist, or perhaps her servants in some form. And in that, the collective is seeming to almost will the paranoia into existence. Almost like they're asking to bend the arc to fear. Manifesting it, if you will. Look, it's not that big of a stretch. There's going to be bigger stretches when we get into trying to pull these two albums together. Just bear with me, okay? This album closes with The Ones We Leave Behind. Starting off with the lines, "If you could break down and put yourself together, then would all the pieces ever fit the same?" In such, the mourner is to me recognizing that he'll not be the same person. He's fallen apart completely. He lost who he was through the course of this album and the grief he's processed. And this question is so important that it gets repeated for the bridge later in the song. It emphasizes the extent of the mourner's loss of self, and the fact that he may never be able to overcome this. Get every piece of himself and bring it together, but he won't be who he was before. The chorus seems to give us this understanding as to why the mourner is dealing with this now of all times. Distraught faces, vacant homes displace them all the time. The ones we leave behind. No hope, no help. Excuses replace guilt, patronize. The ones we leave behind. I think the mourner is walking through the ruined town, seeing the ghosts of the people he's led to their demise, both in a metaphorical and literal sense. The displacement of people has pushed everyone out, but the more literal ghosts remain. And the mourner has tried to excuse what's happened, but all that really does is patronize the victims of the circumstances at the end of the day. And finally, the pre-chorus. Gods walk amongst all, without fear, without tears, on a higher plane than any one of us. And we know that the mourner has felt guilt about what's happened. To me, this is an understanding that there's more at play than what's being understood thus far. The catastrophist seems to be a god by this logic. She didn't seem to shed any tears for the loss of life on the evidence base and bleed into me. So if you were in the mourner's place, you'd probably want revenge. But the catastrophist is indeed a god. How do you go about killing her, even bringing her to justice? With a fucking dragon. The opening song for In the Court of the Dragon, which I'm going to shorten to Court from now on, is actually another instrumental called X, which is 10 in Roman numerals. It leads to the idea that these two are connected. But the title track, which is the second track, starts with the line, "In the court of the dragon, death of gods and world. In the court of the dragon, you will know your worth." According to the music video, this in itself is a quote from Hastur, which is a Lovecraft thing, I think. Anyway, assuming we're meant to take this at face value, this dragon is likely the only thing that could end the catastrophist's reign. Here's the thing, I don't think that this is actually from the viewpoint of the catastrophist, so what's my logic? The song in the second chorus, which I don't think is actually called a chorus, but I don't have the word for it. Not the point, Rose. Focus. In spite of all the hate behind these eyes, I've seen only one of us survives. I'm here to destroy you. I'm here to avenge. In the court of the dragon, I descend. Point blank, I think the dragon is the catastrophist. It's not uncommon for dragons to be able to take on some sort of human form in fiction, and if we assume the dragon is the same as the catastrophist, it makes a lot more sense with everything we've discussed up to this point. The mourner would want revenge and to destroy any aspect of the catastrophist, and such avenging the dead and avenging the town that's been destroyed. Hell, if you consider that the mourner knew that the catastrophist has this dragon aspect, and this isn't new information, it leads to this uncovering as to how the mourner knew that working with the catastrophist would lead to ruin, with the implications of her just being a god and the ones we leave behind being a misunderstanding of her true power. Again, if you take the opening lines at face value. Additionally, I listened to this album and formulated an opinion before I saw any of the music videos, and I actually didn't know there were references to dead men, and it ended up strengthening my point. There are these vertebrae that show up. They seem to be the same vertebrae from the music video for Dead Man. The problem comes in the mourner. This guy from the music video for Court clearly isn't the mourner, so how can I still justify this reading? Recast. That's actually all I have. I think this blonde guy is still meant to be the mourner, and I'm perfectly willing to admit that is, at best, a stretch. I will not blame you if you cannot agree on this. And since I'm already like a paragraph deep off topic, now seems like the best time to bring up a few points. Matt Hafey had said this album is based on mythology and is in itself a concept album, according to some guy on Reddit. That was likely just a meme though. Anyways, the second song is like a sword over Damocles. It's largely about this idea that the mourner's guilt may never be able to leave him, the catastrophe seeming to hold it over him. Dark winters, necrotic, seems this will never end, are the opening lines for the song, necrotic being a reference to dead flesh and the last line being pretty much a gimme with the context we have. It's the first line I'd like to highlight to some extent. Winter is inherently a rather dark time of year. There's actually just less sun, so by noting the winter is dark, we get the impression that there's an especially noticeable lack of sun. The path the mourner is walking is darkening, and it's only getting more bleak. He's already lost who he is, and now there's this air that this is only going to get darker. And we've even seen in this song, in the second verse, it says, "Declension, this poison, the power killing me. Detachment, who am I? What have I done?" The mourner's morals are being eroded through this process. It's a poison. And while he's now in a better position to be able to claim what he's wanting, he feels detachment from that and from himself, in my opinion, questioning who he is and what he's done. If you take into account the amount of time between the release of Dead Man in Court, it's possible that he doesn't even really know why he wants revenge anymore. Only that he knows he wants it. In the bridge, we can see what power he's obtained. Is it all that you hoped for? Feel the weight of being king. Whether he's rebuilt the town he's lost or simply made a new kingdom of sorts, he's feeling the weight of it all. And while the catastrophist is taunting him and refusing to let him live for his sins, since he'll not even remember clearly anymore, it seems. The next song is Feast of Fire, which to me mostly gives context to why the mourner may not remember why exactly he's wanting revenge anymore. Churning through miseries, I find a tear unshed, the emptiness inside of me, it brings me out for dead. Read the opening lines. In the last album, there was a pretty big point that the mourner is feeling he's lost himself. Here it gets recontextualized by the passage of time and him feeling empty. But as he fights for his vengeance, he sheds a tear he didn't know he still had. It almost feels like a throwaway line, given the context and lack of emphasis put on it. But to me, that's part of the point. He's shedding a tear for a reason he doesn't even remember now. A reason so distant that the fact there even is a tear seems pointless. I'm crawling through a feast of fire, burning, sinking down, till these feelings become a blur. It was all a blur, and then it was nothing. It's the last half of the chorus, and the start of the bridge. In such, the mourner seems to be fighting the dragon. While this is going on though, I don't think this is the main confrontation, just the approach. The feeling of vengeance and regret and everything else are blurred to the point they become nothing. It implies that the emotion he has about this mean nothing to him anymore. Next up, track 5, A Crisis of Revelation. For those keeping track at home, 1 was an instrumental track, which I mentioned earlier. It has nothing to the story. Moving on. Banished immortal, deformed out of recognition, everything believed in was dead, floundering in the void, suffering the constant scourge, cursed to walk alone amongst the stars. The mourner is dying, or at least believes he's dying here. The banished immortal is most likely the catastrophist, being in the form of a dragon, would put her out of recognition. The mourner doesn't have any belief left. He's driven purely by vengeance, seemingly not even sure why, as I've mentioned several times at this point. In such, he's struggling to keep going, dealing with this constant scourge, this feast of fire, this inability to recall why he's doing this, all the while being cursed to walk alone amongst these stars. The stars, which according to lyrics I didn't bring up from the song Court, have gone out. Not even the stars will accompany him while he waits for his undoing, and approaches the lair of the beast. And the bridge gives us better insight into what he's waiting on. Waiting for it all to fall. It screamed in this almost desperation, like somehow everything coming down would save the mourner in this moment, and the chorus adds to this in some ways. Time will betray under skies without re-age. I lie in wait for them to open the gates, take me. The mourner has, as mentioned, accepted his defeat and is hoping that he can just wait it out, then the gates will be open for him. But instead, we get my favorite song on this album. Early into the shadow of the Abattoir, it is implied both the dead and possibly the dragon, or something else, is saying, "What's known is now lost forever, endless shadows lead the way." To me, the implication here is that the dead town is trying to stop the mourner, saying he won't be able to find his way and his path will only be covered in darkness. As previously mentioned, the path the mourner is walking seems to be getting darker as we continue. They even tell him the vengeance that he wants won't be found. Don't go searching for the battle. You won't find any beast to slay. You'll rip yourself to pieces, you'll drive yourself insane in the shadow of the Abattoir. The implication here is that the mourner won't make it to the lair of the beast. He'll succumb well before then. He'll only ever get to the shadow of the beast later, which is said to be an abattoir, a slaughterhouse. Snow covers every path, stumbling, no turning back. Is the first half of the opening verse. We've already had it stated that this album takes place during a dark winter, but with snow covering all paths, there's no way the mourner could likely be able to find a way back. Even if he were to turn around to do so, despite the best efforts of the dead, there's nothing to be done except see this to the end. No way back, just through. It's the name of the next song. I know it's a little confusing given the context of the previous sentence, not the point. In this song, the mourner seems to strengthen his resolve. His way back is completely gone, and with the voices of the dead trying to tell him he can't win, he resolves to hunt the catastrophist down anyway. He even understands he won't be the one to end her. I will not live to see the final justice, but I'll be the one that comes for you. He even goes as far as to refer to himself as a blight, this emptiness, this curse. With everything the catastrophist has done, he will not allow her to escape. He will do everything in his power to carry out this vengeance and face her, and with that, we're not going to the next song. I'm gonna take a step back for a moment. Real talk, about half this album kind of drags for me. Although I seem to be very much in a minority for that, it takes a bit for some of them to show where they're going and not just be there for me. It's very progressive in that, and while I do like myself some progressive, I don't think Trivium did it very well. And I am doing my best to give each song its own spotlight and talk about how it plays into this connected story that was almost definitely not intended. So if you've liked what you've heard so far, I actually want you to stop here. Go listen to the two albums and try and understand the ending on your own. Trivium is one of my personal favorite metalcore bands, easily in the top 5 for me, so go check out both albums, come back with your own interpretation of the ending. When you do come back, tell me what you think the ending is. I want to see how it differs from mine. And now that you've definitely gone and listened to them, I will finish up on my take of the ending. And if you did not listen to them, I'm going to find you and I'm going to make you drink some fucking water. The next song is Fall Into Your Hands. And it's fucking beautiful, but we're here for the lore. To me, this is the last remnants of those townspeople that the catastrophist has slaughtered. The townspeople recognize that they are also to blame for submitting to the catastrophist when they did, though the implication is they didn't have a choice. Way back on Amongst the Shadows and the Song, we saw an uprising, but here there's a verse in the song that says, "Sanctioned to serve, brought to your knees, lost inside my head, freedom to bleed." It's from the perspective of the mourner. The townspeople didn't have a choice in serving the catastrophist, and now they only exist as memories in the mourner's head. Memories that the mourner has to some extent lost, as we've made clear on this album. But he believes that by making the catastrophist bleed, he can free them in some way. The opening verse talks about how the townspeople were afraid to quote his name, presumably the mourners by my interpretation, and that they were destined to burn. That was carved into their heads, likely from the very moment they interacted with the catastrophist. But they were, after all, the ones who worked with her, letting their lives burn down. And all they could do was pray in those moments, and they admit that what they got was deserved. And yes, all of that is in this song. It's 7 minutes long. All they can do at this point is fall into the hands of the mourner, trust him to do what he's resolved to do. Take vengeance upon the catastrophist. The penultimate song is From Dawn to Decadence. It's from the perspective of the dragon. I can't outrun what is coming for me. It is a line said twice in the song, in both verses. At this point, the catastrophist knows she cannot run away. She will be caught by the mourner regardless. It's almost the same as Crisis of Revelation in that regard, but from the perspective of our antagonist. Anyways, there's another verse. I don't know if I call it a bridge or a pre-chorus or what have you, but it's not the point. It's all the hate that my heart beats, negates my sympathies. In the title song for this album, there's a big emphasis that the mourner can see the hate behind the eyes of the dragon, and now we see that very hate negates her sympathies. It's very likely she felt nothing about the town being ruined back on Bleed Into Me. Adding to that, the catastrophist feels like nothing she has is able to be reaped properly. The chorus says, It's like all we need and all we want just withers on the vine with all we love. While the catastrophist has sown the seeds, she will not be allowed to reap what she has sown, especially not if the mourner has anything to say about it. Speaking of, how is he doing? Don't let this take me. Split me wide open. Rip me from the stars. Oh, he ain't doing too good. The last song is The Phalanx, which is where the last quote came from. It's the final moments before the battle, or maybe just after the battle. It's hard to pinpoint down, with some of the lines implying that it's after and some implying it's before. A great example is the opening lines of the song. Within the thrill admits the kill, one against all, soon blood will spill. But at the end of the day, it's hardly the point of the song, really. The mourner has come to understand this vengeance he wants will destroy him in the end. He's begging for it not to. This vengeance he's wanted for so long is going to destroy him. This vengeance he's strived for has unraveled him. The mourning wasn't what undid him in the end. It was the actions he took because of it. Do my actions dictate my own unraveling? In 2020, Trivium released What the Dead Men Say. I talked about it with one of my best friends at the time. He had got me into the band. We talked about the song in depth, every single one. I talked about the storyline I felt the album made, and we agreed that made sense. The following year, he would pass. It took me a long time to process, and I'm still not really sure if I have. So when Trivium released In the Court of the Dragon later that same year, it took me a long time to give the album the time of day. I somewhat immediately started noticing this continuation from the plot threads of the prior album. Came up with a full story and haven't really shut up about it since. And maybe it's because some part of me doesn't want to let go. If Trivium continued their story, then my best friend got to see it. He may not be able to see the story conclude, but he saw the first chapter. And that makes it okay to listen to, because he's there in some way, in spirit, right? But maybe I can close this chapter on Trivium. Maybe, kinda like the mourner, I couldn't just let it be. And maybe in doing so, it will tear me asunder. But maybe I'm okay with that. I'm okay with never fully letting go. There's no beast for me to fight. I'm not going insane in the shadow of the abattoir. There's no winning when it comes to grief. Today marks 3 years since Trivium released In the Court of the Dragon. And it's been over 4 since What the Dead Men Say. And I can never forget what Dead Men did to me when I listened to it after I lost my best friend. I still don't know how I happened to experience the deep loss I had so close to an album that directly deals with grief in such profound ways, only to then have the next album have just enough threads that I could justify them being the same story. Maybe there's actually something there, maybe I'm crazy, I don't know anymore. I'm just tired.